Anyone who has tried to create an email template in Marketo knows what a pain this can be. Today I'm going to show you the best way to create email templates in Marketo so that they scale well across different screen sizes and so that they look amazing no matter what email client and device combination is being used. I'll also show you how we can populate these email templates with variables and tokens so that they are easy to modify in the email editor, so that the emails can be populated via API, and so that we can reuse these emails across programs to reduce the number of emails that we need to build. And if you want to import the email template I'll be using in this video into your own Marketo instance to follow along, then you can follow this link here and it'll bring you to GitHub, and you can just copy and paste this into a new email template in Marketo so that you can see how to structure your own templates and use this as an example. Now let's take a look at the structure of a Marketo email template. So it consists of a container that houses all the modules within the template, modules that are then made up of elements. Elements are the content of your email, taking the form of either rich text, images, snippets, or videos. And then variables can be used within elements to change the content of an element. And these variables can have these different data types. I think the best way to understand the format is to actually look at an email within Marketo. So here we can see the different modules that are available within this image. And if we want, we can always drag in more modules into our email. Like we can drag in a title module here, or we can drag in another card inverse module here. So building our email template with these modules makes them very modular and easy to modify here when we're building the email in the editor. So we can see that our email is made up of modules, and then within these modules we've got our elements. So we can see we've got an image element here and we've got some rich text elements here, and we can see that these elements are populated with variables. So they are denoted by the $sign and the curly brackets we can see here. Might zoom in a bit more so you can see those better. So we can see that this element is populated with the card text in variable. So this is how an email is structured, with modules, elements within these modules, and then we can have these elements populated with variables. And as I call out in the blog post here, setting our email up in this very structured fashion makes it very easy to not only update in the editor, but also update via API. And you can see an example of this around the 5 mark of this video here. And this video is also within the Marketo dynamic email content via API post. So take a look at this post to see how you can streamline your email creation process by automatically populating your emails with content from a Google Sheet. We use the Marketo API to do this, and this is facilitated because our email template is structured so well. Just to give you a quick example of what I'm talking about here, when we've got our email template structured like this, it makes it very easy to take content which is structured within a Google Sheet and then take these pieces of content, whether they are links or pieces of text, and push them into different email variables within our email template. So it's very easy to map from the Google Sheet cells to Marketo variables, and then we can use the API to transfer all the values from the Google Sheet into our email. Okay, so let's take a look at how to create a email template in Marketo. I highly recommend using a third-party drag and drop email building tool like Stripo, because the only way you can build email templates in Marketo is with the email template editor, and you have to do this using HTML and CSS code, which is no fun at all. So I highly recommend using a third-party tool to first design your email template, and then once you're happy that the email template you've designed scales well across screen sizes and works on different email clients and devices, then you can import the HTML code from this third-party tool into Marketo. And once you have that code, it's very easy then within Marketo to come into the Design Studio, go to the email template section, go to new email template. Let's just call it test 2023, open in the editor. And then all you would do is I'm going to zoom out a bit here. You'd take all this text that is already in here, delete it, and then you take all the HTML code from your third-party provider and then paste this in here instead. And then you have your email template in Marketo ready to be Marketofied. And I'm going to explain what I mean by Marketofied in a second. One quick tip I'm going to give you guys is that when you import your code from the third-party tool, you might want to use a HTML formatting tool like this one here, where you'll paste in the HTML code and it will give you a nicely formatted HTML code that you can then paste into your Marketo email template. So I've already done this. That's why this code here looks so nice already. However, if you first import this code from your third-party tool, it might not look like this. So I highly recommend using the HTML formatter, because the better your code looks, the easier it is to modify. And we're going to need to modify it in a second to Marketofy it. And you should also do the same with any existing email templates in your Marketo instance. If they look ugly and messy, put them into the HTML formatter. Okay, so now I'm going to explain what I mean by Marketofying the HTML code we import from the third party. And what I mean by this is when we Marketofy the HTML code, we are going to add in modules, elements, and variables according to the Marketo syntax. And the reason we need to do this is that if we don't Marketofy the email template, then it won't be possible to edit it within the email editor. So I'll give you an example of this. So this first email that I showed you guys here, this developer newsletter email, this is made from the developer newsletter template. And this is what the developer newsletter template looks like. So we've got all our variables defined at the top of the HTML code. And then within the classes, we can see that we've got things like modules defined. We've got images defined. We've also got IDs and Marketo names defined for the elements too, and also for the containers and for the modules. So this is what I mean by Marketofying the email template. We need to put in all these Marketo classes for the modules, elements, and containers. And we also need to put in any variables that we want to use within our HTML code. I'll show you what a raw HTML template looks like when we first import it from a third-party tool. So that is in the developer newsletter raw template here. And we'll do a comparison between the two to see what changes need to be made. I've zoomed in a lot here for you guys, so that should make looking at this code a bit easier. So looking at this code here, the first thing you'll notice is that it's missing a lot of the pink text that is appearing here. So that is a visual indication of how the two are different. And all this pink text corresponds to the insertion of all the Marketo class names, IDs, Marketo names, and also the variables. So let's just take a specific example here where we're looking at, let's say, this ES header. Let's look at it in our raw template. So this is the ES header class in the raw template, and we can see that it is missing the Marketo module within the class, and it also doesn't have the ID of the module or the Marketo name for the module. So this shows you how when we first import the raw template from our third-party provider, it's missing a lot of these essential elements that will later on allow us to edit the email within the email editor. So let me show you what an email made from this raw template from our third party looks like. So this developer newsletter raw here, we can see that it's made from the developer newsletter raw template. So if we go into this email and we go into the draft, we can see that there are no modules here on the right hand side, and we can't edit this email whatsoever. I can't use the what you see is what you get editor here to edit any of the text or any element of this email whatsoever. And then comparing this to the developer newsletter email, which we created from the developer template, which we have Marketofied, we can see that we can edit every aspect of this email using either the what you see is what you get editor, or we can edit it on the right hand side here by modifying all the variables that are present within the email. So this shows you why we need to modify the code we get from the third party, and that's why we need to Marketify it by adding in all the class names, IDs, Marketo names, and also any variables we want to use within the templates. Okay, let me walk through some of the main changes that need to be made here. So underneath this ES wrapper TR style border collapse, we need to add a TD class for the Marketo container and give it the ID container. So we can see that we need to put that in here. Then the next thing we need to do is we need to add the Marketo module to any table tags that we want to turn into Marketo modules. So here we can see we want to turn this ES header class. We want to turn this table into a Marketo module. So therefore, we just put in the Marketo module into the class name here, and we give the module an ID and we give it a name. Oops. And this Marketo name is the name we will see for the module when we are editing it within the email editor. The ID of the module here is what we will use to reference this module when we are updating it via API. And then for any image tags we have, we need to add the Marketo image class, and then the same as before, we need to give the image an ID so we can reference it via API, and we need to give it a Marketo name as well. So we can see for this image here, it's the header 2-column logo. So that's this image here. We can see its Marketo name here, and we can see it's being populated with the logo 2-column header variable. So yep, we can see it's being populated with the logo 2-column header variable here. Okay, so let me just show you a few more examples. So wherever we have a element where we've got paragraphs, we need to add in the Marketo text into the class name. We need to give it an ID again, and we also need to give it a Marketo name. And then if we want, we can also use variables within some of the text here too. So this is using a variable we'll define at the top of our HTML code. And then we can see here, we are defining another Marketo module by inserting this text into the existing class, giving it an ID, giving it a Marketo name. And then we've got another table element here with text inside it. In this case, we've got some paragraphs and we've got an unordered list. So we're just going to add in the Marketo text syntax here inside the existing class name. And then again, we're going to give it an ID and a Marketo name. And then if we want, I'm not sure if we do this here, let's see, we can also use variables within this text element that we're defining. And we can see we do it quite a few times here. So I hope that makes sense about how we need to modify the email template from the third-party provider to include all these elements, which will make it easier to modify within the email editor, but also easier to modify via API. Another tip for you guys, and I call it out here in the blog post, is I highly recommend adding comments to your Marketo code to make it as easy as possible to edit and find the right section that you need to edit. So for example, here you can see that I use these comments, make it very easy to see where one module starts and ends, and then where the next module starts and ends. And this makes it so much easier when you need to find a particular module that you want to edit. So I highly recommend doing this. And the next thing I'm going to show you guys is how we define variables for our emails. So we define these all at the top of our HTML code, and you'll see that we need to say what type of variable it is. And I mentioned all the types of variables that we can have at the top of this post. So we have to specify the type of the variable. We have to give it an ID. And again, this is the ID which we'll use to reference it when using the API. We have to give it a name. So you'll notice that all these Marketo names are the names of the variables that we see in the right-hand side of the email editor. And then we also have to specify a default value, which is just a fallback value in the case that nothing is specified. This is what the variable will be equal to. And then we also have to specify a module scope. If the module scope is true, that means it is a local variable. And if the module scope is false, that means it's a global variable. So to explain the difference between the two with some examples, I'm going to slice in a description I did in a previous video because I believe I described it quite well, and I don't want to have to repeat myself, so stay tuned for that. Okay, so now let's cover the difference between local and global email variables in Marketo email templates. So you'll notice that for the vast majority of these email variables, you can see that this Marketo module scope is set equal to true. And that means that this variable will be a local variable, whereas at the top here, you can see that the module scope for this UTM variable is set equal to false. So when the module scope is set equal to false, that means it will be a global variable. And I'll show you now what the difference between the two is within the email itself. So I'll start with the global variable. So you can see that this UTM global variable that we defined here in the template, we set the module scope equal to false for this variable. So that's why it appears here in the global variable section as opposed to appearing underneath one of these other sections at the top. And where this global UTM variable is used, so let's do a search for this variable within the email template. So the way you invoke a variable within an email template is using the $, and then single curly brackets, and then the name of the variable. So let's go find next here to see where it's used. Searching within Marketo email templates is horrible, so bear with me here while I find this. Okay, so I found a good example here. So this sign-in link here has a link to sign in to the Telnex portal. And in the email template here, we can see we have the link to sign in, but then we append this link with the UTM variable here. So we have the $, single curly brackets, and then the name of the variable, and this will pull in that global UTM variable. And we append this global UTM variable to the end of every link in this email. So if I go Command F and I search for it again, my next, we can see that the link for one of the buttons, so we pull in the variable to get the link from the button, then we append the UTM parameter, and then we do the same thing again. We pull in the link for the button. So we'll define this variable here in the email. So for example, if it's the feature block, we'll put in the button link here. So this value is what will be pulled in to this variable. And then again, we append it with the global UTM variable. So this means that when we specify this global UTM variable here, and then in our email template, we use this global UTM variable after every single link in the email. So this link will have the UTM variable appended, this link, this link, this link, they'll all have the global UTM variable appended. So this is a great example of where to use global variables. You define it once over here, and then every single link within your email will have this global UTM variable appended. An example of where you use local variables instead is in these card sections. So within these card sections, you want each card to have a different title, different text, and a different link. So that's why even though at the top here, in the email, let's look at the card section. We've got one single card section where we define all the local variables. We can see the module scope is equal to true here. We define all the local variables used within these card sections. And then within the lower section of our template, we've got a card 1 defined, we've got a card 2 defined, and we've got a card 3 defined. And within each of these sections, they can all use the exact same local variables. And since the definition of these variables is local, these variables can have different values within each card section. So if we specify the card title here, we just say like Tyron test. We can change the card title here without affecting what the card title is in these other two cards. So similarly here, we can set this into Tyron test 2. So this is an example of where you use local variables, where you want to have repeated content, but have these variables have different values within each of those different pieces of content. The reason you wouldn't use a global variable here for these card sections is because if this card title was a global variable, if you set this equal to Tyron test, then all these other card titles would be Tyron text as well. So that would be a very bad example of a global variable, and that's why you want to use local variables for these different sections. So just to summarize, the reason we use email variables within Marketo emails is because it gives our emails a great structure. And then we can set up a Google Sheet like this, where we can map each of these sections of content to particular email variables and then update them very easily using the API. Okay, so now that you hopefully understand the difference between local and global email variables, we're going to take a look at how we can use tokens within our email templates so that we can change up the content of the email based on the lead that is receiving the email using lead tokens, or we can change the email content based on the program or smart campaign that the email is being sent from. And we can do this using local program tokens or trigger tokens from smart campaigns. So the example I'm going to go through here is we've got different ebooks, and whenever someone fills out a form to download the ebook, we want to send them an email with a link to download the ebook. And the way we do this is we use one single email. And the reason we can get away with using a single email to send different links to different pieces of content is because within our content delivery email template here, we make reference to the my.content link local program token. So within each of our ebook programs here, we've got a different value for this my.content link local program token. And by pulling in this local program token into our Marketo email template here, this means that when we request this global content delivery email to be sent, it will pull in this local program token, and this is what the download it now text will link to. So this is what the email looks like, and this download it now text will be updated to point to the local program token within each ebook program. And you can see that we use the exact same email for this ebook, and we're going to use the exact same email for sending this ebook to. So that's the advantage of using tokens within your email templates, is that it allows you to reuse the same email across many programs. So therefore, it reduces the number of emails you need to build and maintain. Okay, so now that we've completely Marketofied our email, let's do the final part and test to make sure that our Marketo email template still scales across screen sizes and across different devices and email clients. So when we first brought in our tool from our third party tool should have ensured that it already scaled well and looked good on all devices and email clients. However, we had to modify our email template to Marketofy it, and while modifying it, we could have broken some things. So we need to redo some testing to make sure that the email still looks good. And the best way I recommend doing this is using a third-party email testing tool like Email on Acid, which allows you to preview your email template across many different devices and email clients, so you can be sure that it looks good no matter what. However, if you don't have a third-party email testing tool like Email on Acid, then at the very least, I recommend sending your email template sample to as many of your own email addresses as possible and across as many different email clients as possible, like Gmail, Outlook, Yahoo, etc., to make sure it looks good. And then check it on both your desktop and your mobile to make sure it scales well. And once we complete these tests, we now have a fully functioning Marketo email template that looks good across all screen sizes, email clients, and devices. As I mentioned earlier on in this post, you can reduce the number of emails you need to build and maintain by populating your email templates with tokens. And you can even use trigger tokens to do this. So take a look at the Marketo trigger tokens example usage post to thoroughly understand trigger tokens, because I give a number of examples of how you can use them within smart campaigns. And then you can take the next step and put them in your email templates. And then, as I mentioned and I showed during this video, you can populate your emails via API, and you can use this for streamlining and automating your email creation process, taking all the content from a Google Sheet and putting it straight into your Marketo email. And you can even create dynamic content sections in your emails, and then you can populate these dynamic content sections based on different use cases for your different personas. So check out this blog post here to see how to do that. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, then please subscribe.